You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Good evening. We'll call this meeting of the Branford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Welcome back, everyone. It is Thursday, July 1, 2021. It is 7:03 p.m. And I will introduce members of our commission and staff before we begin. To my far right, we have Commission Member John Lust. Next to John is Commission Member Joe Chadwick. Next to Joe, Commission Member Joe Viuzzo. Turning the corner, we have Commission Member Fred Russo. Next to Fred is Commission Member Paul Higgins. To my left, we have Commission Member Marcy Pelusi, and next to Marcy is Commission Member Massimo Ligori. Our staff this evening is our Town Planner Harry Smith, our Assistant Planner Evan Brining, our new Zoning Enforcement Officer Dylan Willett, and our Clerk Recording Secretary Michelle Martin over here in the corner. I am Chuck Andrews, Chair. We have two continued public hearings this evening. And just one note for commission members. You see you have a microphone in front of you. Whenever you speak, you need to push this so it's green. So the TV won't pick you up if that isn't on. So it's sort of like your Zoom, you're going to be muted if that isn't on green. So we have two continued public hearings this evening, and we'll follow our normal format for public hearings. That is our commission. The applicant will go first, make his presentation. After the applicant is done with his presentation, we allow comments from the public. We ask that you come forward, state your name and address for the record, make your public comments. And after that, we will allow applicant to respond to public comments. It's likely that, it's possible we may or may not continue the public hearing depending on how it goes. With that, we'll start with our first public hearing, which is Monoways Development Group, LLC, John R. and Ann Pines, Branford Building Supplies, owners of 16 Buckley Hill Road and 0 Buckley Hill Road. It's 1416 and 0 Buckley Hill Road, special exception and coastal site plan for open space residential developments. Applicant ready to proceed?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, mine's on green. I just wanted to make sure. My name is Amy Suchins, here representing the applicant. This is our, I think, third night of discussion, and I'm here, and what we have pending later on in your agenda, as we discussed at the last meeting, we have submitted an application for special exception related to grading on the property. That will be heard at your public hearing at the next meeting on July 15th. So we are going to, I have a couple of comments to make tonight, but we're going to reserve the rest of the substantive presentation so we can incorporate the rest of that discussion and the record into that public hearing on the 15th. Among the things that we will be talking about and where we left off at the meeting 2 weeks ago were an issue related to the ownership of land below mean high water and the implications of mean high water on this property, which is the one thing I do want to talk about tonight. Request about landscaping along Marshall, and Ms. Pelusi's question about whether there's any opportunity to potentially soften some of the edges on the property and the development envelope here. So those are all of the things that we are continuing to look at and implicate this question about the tidal wetlands and the boundaries. In follow-up to the discussion we had at the last meeting, we had, and I in particular, have continued to review the applications that you've submitted and you've reviewed and approved in the past. As I mentioned, something like the landing or other properties that have been approved with conditions of donations of open space, often as I said, with respect to the landing, where that land is substantially below mean high water and would raise the same issue here. But the other option that we looked into to try and get some further review was to actually reach out to the DEEP staff that had been reviewing our CAM application. You'll recall that they had submitted a letter recommending approval and requesting public access at our last meeting. In particular, we sort of escalated the question to the more senior staff, who was unfortunately unavailable last week, so we weren't able to speak to him until earlier this week. We actually spoke with him, actually the client spoke with him on Monday and communicated what his request was that I'll share with you to Harry on Tuesday, which is that his name is David Kozak. He is the senior coastal planner at DEEP, who's been involved with the review of this application and the creation of the letter that was submitted to you by DEEP at the last meeting. He was frankly a little surprised that there was a concern about, what the issue was with the donation of the open space here, because they do consider it an important piece for long-term protection and providing connectivity, but also indicated that he'd be happy to answer any of the questions that the commission has raised that Harry may have with respect to how DEEP views the property, any implications of mean high water, particularly given that this is the less typical situation where usually you're dealing with mean high water and access over it in a typical beachfront situation. So Mr. Kozak certainly recognizes that this is a little bit of a different situation. He did participate in both of the site walks for this property. So he's not only acting in his role as advisor to the staff person reviewing and preparing the letter, but also has been out to the site on 2 occasions, and so has personally observed a number of the conditions and the topography and flows of water and such on the site. And as I said, he said he'd be willing to answer any of the questions that you may have. He did request, however, that those questions come directly from the commission, not through us. Obviously, typically what DEEP is doing is reviewing a referral from the town with respect to, as it did here, with respect to the CAM application. And so would request that the questions that have been raised are directed to him through the commission, basically through its staff. And so what I wanted to do this evening was to find out and frankly ask you to direct Harry if there are any other questions that have come up either in the issues that we've raised, that have been raised by the members of the public, or in your own thoughts about the process, that we could understand and make sure that those are all communicated so that way they can get to Mr. Kozak, hopefully tomorrow or early next week. So that way, when we're here back on the 15th, everybody's had the opportunity to, number one, he's able to get those comments, he's able to respond, and those can be circulated for your review if there's any necessary follow-up, so we can have a discussion about those on the 15th. As I understand the issues that have been raised, there is a summary in Harry's June 16th staff memo that outlined those couple of questions. Attached to that is a slightly longer question to Katie, I think it's Perzanowski, who is the staff person who wrote the letter that was submitted to you. Mr. Kozak was actually not on that original email to her a number of weeks back, but I think those two things are how the issues have been raised to us. So if there's anything in addition to those two items, those could be certainly included. There was a discussion raised by Mr. Horn at the last meeting with respect to a revision to, I think it was a town grant that was received on another acquisition of open space, and that there was some revision to be done. If that's something you want further information on that DEEP may have access to, or your staff, certainly that's the type of question that you could refer to him. Or if there are any other issues or considerations, particularly with respect to the resources or DEEP's thought process or additional views beyond what's incorporated into their letter from last time. That's the kind of thing that I think I would really encourage you to discuss this evening and be able to discuss to have Mr. Smith incorporate into that request. So that's the extent of what I wanted to ask for discussion on tonight. I don't know if there were any other additional thoughts beyond that, or if there are any questions about how we could get any other information to you through DEEP that would address anything else you've heard that would fall within their jurisdiction.
Thank you, Ms. Suchins. Thank you, Ms. Suchins. Violet Mayor. Did you ever give us an opinion as to what your opinion is as to where the boundary is of the land? Does it go to the mean high tide water mark or not? What is your client own title to?
So we showed on the last at the last meeting the map where the mean high water mark is. I will tell you that based on my client's conversation with Mr. Kozak and his site visit, that he actually is not sure whether what was measured as mean high water is correct, because mean high water isn't a precise determination. I mean, obviously, I think you're familiar, the case law says that below mean high water, there is a public trust in that ownership, or excuse me, in that land. Again, it goes back to the question we had of if that's true of tidal wetlands as well, and I find nothing definitive. Believe me, I've searched. I find nothing definitive that talks about how it applies in a circumstance where there's, theoretically land that you could, you could access or something like that. Which is frankly why we reached out to Mr. Kozak to find out if this has occurred in other situations or how it's dealt with, particularly given the fact that there are other open space areas, that we're aware of in Branford that are below mean high water and owned by either the town or often the land trust. So clearly there's an understanding there, but I'm not going to stand here and disagree with you that Connecticut case law is that there is a public trust below mean high water. I think the question is what's the implication of that in the context of it being available as a, for public preservation, particularly given how this has been approached consistently by the commission in the past.
When you say there's a public trust below high water line, do you mean that your title goes to the to that line?
That's my understanding of how Connecticut law interprets it, that we would own unquestionably up to mean high water wherever that's ultimately determined to be. And that's the sort of challenge of it, is that in investigating where mean high water is, there is a variety of, we've talked to our surveyor who's talked to another expert, and there are different ways of trying to evaluate. So what we showed at the last meeting and is depicted on the map that Mr. Sacco presented is what we are frankly best understanding of mean high water is, and that was why, because it's somewhat site specific and may actually depend here, as I understand it, there's the impact of the tide gate that's south of this property, so it may have had some effect historically on where mean high water is, as opposed to simply trying to match an elevation like you might have with, for example, the FEMA flood line, where that's always at elevation 13. Under sort of current circumstances, mean high water is more variable.
And I think you may have responded orally last time, but have you provided us what you believe, what the title of the open space that would be dedicated open space, what's the acreage? And
that's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to encourage you to discuss tonight, because based on the comment from Mr. Kozak's site visit, that he actually thinks that where we're depicting may in certain locations we're showing a higher mean high water line, which is on the plans that we submitted approximately elevation 3. He thinks there's some locations where it might actually be elevation 2. What we're trying to figure out in order to do that calculation is where mean high water is, which is why we wanted DEEP's input as to, if we're going to calculate how much land is above or below mean high water, as you've asked us to, we obviously need to know where that line is. If we're showing on the previous plan 3 feet, but based on the site visit, maybe it's closer to 2. That's why we're trying to figure out and get some input from DEEP as to how best to do that calculation. But we're working on it. as I understand it, Mr. Sacco has started to compile it based on where elevation 3 is on that plan we had submitted last time. If ultimately the determination is that mean high water is, closer to 2, obviously we have more land above mean high water. We want to give you the goal would be to give you a plan and a number that correspond.
Okay, yeah, that is something we are interested in, and
absolutely.
Hopefully you can get that from your surveyor, and whether they
Yes.
need to talk with DEP or whoever they need to talk to.
Right.
That's the information we.
Yes, and that's exactly why we had ultimately, as I said, reached out to DEEP to find out if we could get a little bit more information as far as what their view of mean high water and its effect and sort of relevance here.
Thank you. Harry, do you have anything that you'd like to summarize at this time?
Yes, I'm stopping myself from announcing my name as we have to do on Zoom, but I just want to follow up with the mean high water a little bit. I appreciate the opportunity to correspond with DEEP. It sounds like the real substantive comments that they may provide some feedback and input on with respect to what you just talked about, which is the extent of mean high water, where that line is on the property, what elevation, and how much acreage is involved below mean high water that is in the public domain. That's theoretically already owned by the public, so it's protected open space already. So I don't know if you're suggesting that we approach them with a legal question. It sounds like you're saying that you acknowledge that below mean high water is the public domain, and therefore really.
Right. What I'm saying is that there's nothing definitive I can find in the situation that we have here involving tidal wetlands that frankly have a different effect of mean high water and whether or not the tide gate and everything else. And the question is, how does that apply here? Yeah, and what I'm saying is that Mr. Kozak has been very clear with us that he is happy to offer his guidance and input. And I'm requesting that the commission, because he's asking that the question and the issue be raised with you, frankly, as it was in your email back to them earlier this spring, that you get that input because that's how DEEP is asking for that advice and information to be submitted to them so we can get it. If I could have him, if I could have him show up or have him do that, but it was specifically his request that the requests come from the commission, so he understands it's frankly, it's not a game of telephone, that the question about mean high water and the question of public access, ownership, et cetera, is raised to him through you, just like you would in the referral process.
Yeah. It does bring up to my mind the issue of timing and how fast a real definite determination of where the mean high water line may be in the property and how much area is below it in terms of elevation. So I think that's sort of an open question at many levels, because it could impact how the commission makes a decision on the application. So I don't know how long that would take, and I don't know whether DEP has the time or resources to devote to identifying that on this property. I'm certainly happy to explore the question with them if the commission would like me to do that in writing. But given the sort of, the time frame legally, it seems like a very important piece of information that may require also participation by your technical team or augmented by somebody else. So
I think certainly the initial question about, is there an ownership concern? Does DEEP share the commission's concern that we can't convey this property or protect it or somehow? I certainly think you can and should get that information from DEEP as to their perspective on what they deem to be and have said in their prior letter an important public resource, a consideration. They've asked for public access, as I said at the last meeting. If they thought we didn't control this property, they would just say, well, we don't need public access because we already control it. And frankly, that was, I guess, part of my understanding of Mr. Kozak's reaction to the question. So I do think that regardless of what might be site-specific, the big picture question, and I'm happy to direct everybody back to the issue as it was raised to DEEP before we even started.
Well, I think the issue really before the commission is with respect to the regulations for an open space residential development. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about section 7.3B. You've got standards with a development less than 15 acres. The open space needs to fit into one of three categories. It needs to consist of 5 acres or more. It's unclear that it will consist of 5 acres.
And what I'm saying.
Well, hang on one second. Sorry. And then the other option is adjunct to existing permanently designated open space land outside the area covered by the application. And the discussion at the last public hearing ended up including some statements by, I believe, Dave Sacco, that there is a piece of land, a berm, that extends from the area above mean high water, adjacent to where the housing is proposed, through the tidal marsh, all the way to an adjunct property. And then all of that berm is above mean high water.
That's correct.
So, I mean, that might be a critical factor in the commission saying, okay, yes, this development fits in this one of these three options. If that's option 2 that it does fit into, then there's some information about where the mean high water line actually is, and to verify that that berm along its entire length in a continuous fashion all the way to the property line is above mean high water. So I think we would need some information in terms of contours, elevations of that berm area, rather than just LiDAR and that kind of information. We need probably a ground survey or something, I would imagine, to demonstrate that that berm, if that's what the commission's going to have to rely on, if that's the direction you go to approve the application. The other option is it would provide especially valuable open space resources. I mean, I understand you make a case that it does, in looking at how much of it is already protected. I mean, to me, that subtracts from the original proposal, which is that this whole area was not protected, and then it would be outside of regulations. So that's the way I see it in terms of the context of the regulations for this application. I think the other development you cited, I don't believe that was approved as an open space residential development. So I don't think it had a dedicated, it had a requirement for a certain amount of dedicated open space. I think it was a planned residential development, I believe.
I was going to say, it may have been what's recorded on the land records just reflects the conditions of the donation of open space. And when you look at the donation, the donated land of open space the land trust owns, substantially below mean high water if you're using the same concept of where the elevation is.
And according to, I think it was Bill Horn, I believe, who made the comment. I don't know with respect to that open space, but he did say there was a piece of land the land trust received. And
I think he said Helen Road was
they only got a warranty deed for the portion of it that was above mean high water, and just a quick claim deed for the remainder.
And that's why I'm saying, if that's one of the questions, if DEEP was involved with that grant, and I'm not familiar with the property that he was referencing, that's the kind of information that this commission could get by reaching out to Mr. Kozak, which again, I think is.
No, I just try to draw a little distinction because there's a required amount of potentially open space area that needs to be provided as one of the three categories. So, I mean, I think it's a consideration the commission.
And I think my point being that what my understanding of the law is based upon case law that I can find that involves sort of what I think of as traditional beachfront type property. I don't know, and that's the reason for the question to DEEP. How is this treated? And if it was a concern, why would it have been raised in the letter? So I do think it's important, regardless of whether we own it or we don't, for this commission to get the input from DEEP, both with respect to its view, which I think it has in some part, that last element with about the valuable resource, but then also addressing, because they're the ones with frankly more experience and familiarity, because they're dealing with the whole coastline, not just Branford, how this is applied. They may have a different view, or there may be an interpretation. I've run into that at DEEP before, that they have interpretations and policy guidance that's not necessarily readily available unless the issue is raised, and they're happy to weigh in. And that's why I do think that, based on that conversation, I think it's important for the commission to hear from Mr. Kozak. And like I said, it was his request that it come from the commission itself.
Yeah, it's fine. So at the end of the hearing, that section, maybe the commission can weigh in and we can clarify what exactly you'd like me to do. I mean, I think I'm clear about pursuing the question of, on this property, where actually is the elevation of mean high water, and getting input from DEP with respect to the tidal gate at Simple Creek and so forth, how all that influences what that elevation might be, if that is a factor in determining it.
And then if they have a perspective on how they view the ownership issue. I mean, because
that, I don't know. I mean, that at least list the commission, because that to me is a legal question really for a lawyer rather than DEP, unless they bring in, their legal arm of DEP. And I don't know if that would be, that's certainly not, I don't believe what used to be the Office of Long Island Sound Programs. I don't believe they had that arm.
But with all due respect, you asked the question of Katie back in April. Your email to Katie asked them to understand where mean high water is and whether DEEP could speak to the fact that there was a location and what that meant for the ownership issue. So if you're saying now it's just a question that it's too legal of a question that you asked.
No, I wasn't asking for a legal opinion about it. I was asking them, do you believe it needs to be on the plan too, as well? And we had discussions out in the field I did with DEP staff.
And it's on the plan. It's on the plan.
It is on the plan now,
last time.
But is it accurate is what I'm hearing out of you now. You made an assumption, and you're even saying that, well, maybe that's too high an assumption, possibly.
And that was actually DEEP's reaction, was that based on the field visit, we had our surveyor look at it, make some determinations based on what we can, as I said, it's not a precise science as to determining mean high water, but our surveyor was involved in determining what we showed on that plan that was submitted for the last meeting.
Okay. Well, I'm looking to direction from the commission to let me know what to do. So I'll leave all that there. And the other issue I'd like to just briefly touch on.
Can I ask a question before?
Sure.
Marcy, can I ask you a question? So just maybe I'm summarizing, but I'm just trying to get it. The inland wetlands line is approximately at elevation 3.
Title.
The tidal wetland is mapped properly at elevation 3. The mean high water is approximately elevation somewhere between 2 and 3. Is that
So
correct?
the tidal wetland boundary So the tidal wetland boundary is actually, with a handful of exceptions, and I'm looking at the plan, the TPA plan, it's the grading sheet 2 that was updated. The wetlands, the tidal wetlands line is for the most part landward of mean high water.
Right. So
And then mean high water in occasional spots is below that. But I would say roughly hold on, just looking at the right.
So
I would say the wetlands line's probably closer to maybe elevation 4, somewhere between 4 and 5.
So what I'm gathering is we've got a jurisdictional tidal wetlands line that is probably above the ownership line. If we agree to say that the mean
Yes.
high water line is the ownership line of the property. So there is a portion of the property that would allow for public access, but it would still be under the jurisdiction of a wetlands area. So there's really nothing that can go in there without wetlands approval.
Right, that from the perspective of DEEP and what we've tried to show in this plan of the 100-foot buffer between the tidal wetlands line and the limit of development, with the exception of basically 1 or 2 spots, mean high water is below that.
That's
Yes.
my point.
Yep.
My other sort of thing that I want to clarify is, what was the calculation of the land based on? Did it include the whole tidal area, or that 11 acres on the front?
So the entire property calculation is based on all of the land that is,
Including all the tidal
including
areas?
everything below mean high water. When we did, because I think it bears repeating, I mentioned it last time, when we did the calculation for the development density under the open space subdivision, everything below tidal wetlands line, so which would include everything below mean high water, was excluded.
Right, then
So
backed out.
our development concept does not rely on anything below tidal wetland line
Okay. That was sort of the
for
other-
its calculation.
Okay, and this is all the 5 acres and the 15 acres. I mean, your total site area is less than that anyways. That's basically a line to say that they need to provide more than 5 acres, and you're providing 6 point something, give or take where we determine this line to be? Is that
Right,
why
so the
we're?
6 acres would include everything below mean high water as surveyed as our ownership. And that's the reason I think Harry's raising the question that if on the plan it looks like 6,
Right.
but in fact some of it's below mean high water, and the question is
Is it
how
really
much of
6?
that,
Okay,
what are we actually giving you? And that's why,
yeah,
also
I'm
related
just
to.
kind of thinking in margins, we're working with a acre some, or 0.83 margin to understand, that's our margin of play once we determine the line of whether you're
Right.
above or over that.
I will tell you, if we exclude everything below mean high water, we are under 5 acres.
Okay.
So there's no question about that. That
Okay.
then, if we exclude that, we are no longer eligible for, I forgot which sub number it is, but
Right.
I think it's 1. We're no longer eligible for that. So then we're looking at the connection or the valuable resource.
Okay,
Three ways to.
right.
Right.
And is that raised easement the upland area that we were talking about for the sanitary sewer easement? Is that the area that's raised and above at
Yes.
the bottom?
That is
That's
above,
bifurcated.
right.
Okay.
It looks almost like a finger.
Right,
when
well,
you
I'm
look at
just,
the map.
but I'm just wondering what that area is, or if that's been demarcated anywhere relative to,
Right, so
'cause
that's
that
above-
obviously really, to me, shouldn't be in the calculation because it's not accessible from the property without going through the title.
And that's the part that is where now is above mean high water. So there's no question that we own that
Right.
too. So then, in the question of what's above mean high water, what's below mean high water, that's why trying to figure out exactly where mean high water is, as, to do that calculation as the commission's requested, we are trying to assess that number, and because part of that berm is included.
Yeah, I just would kind of like to know whatever the what that area of the berm is and how that plays into all the numbers,
Yeah.
so that I can grant, because I kind of look at where the title line is a real jurisdictional place on the map.
Where the berm is not just that, it's also, there's a phrase here that you're going to have to interpret as commissioner, which is, excuse me, there's a phrase you're going to have to interpret as a commission, which is adjunct to existing permanently designated open space land outside the area covered by the application. Even if it's documented that that berm as a finger extends to an adjoining property, I mean, to me, it's quite, something you're gonna have to determine whether that meets that requirement of that phrase. I mean, you're talking, a piece of open space and a little tiny finger that goes over halfway across to Mr. Lust over there, or, what's adjunct? And what meaning do you put on that phrase would be something you'd have to determine, I think. The other option would be, of course, determining whether it's especially valuable open space, which is another option to meeting the standard.
I'm just trying to understand what's open space is being granted that is above the mean high water line
sure.
versus what's below, and how that relates to the total calculation on the property. And then sort of the other thing that I was trying to understand is, you know, we all hear about sea level rise all the time. You know, how do we plan for that side of, you know, if the threshold's that close, you know, what does that do to the threshold in, you know, 10 years versus 50 years, you know, in terms of the rate of impact? And does it have any relevant impact, you know, on the areas that we're talking about? It may not, you know, maybe, you know, minimal.
It seemed like all open questions. I don't know if we could find the answers to those or to even ask the applicant for it. You know, everyone wants to know. So there is another piece of information beyond mean high water. I sent the commission a copy of an email I received raising a question of whether the existing property is defined in the regulations as an interior lot or a rear lot, so often called, which is a piece of property that does not have the minimum frontage normally required under the zoning regulations. And I sent this also to Ms. Suchins and asked for her opinion about whether she believes the applicant's property should be defined or is defined as an interior lot. There was some questions in here about the standards for an interior lot, just to note that the property already exists, so the commission's not really approving the creation of the property as it would in like a subdivision application, where you're actually creating lot lines and using these standards to decide if it's an acceptable lot under the applicable regulations. I believe the fee strip, if you want to call it that, is at least 25 feet wide. And there's another standard in here about the maximum number of lots, but no additional lots are being proposed here. They're not proposing to divide the property in any way. But there is a section in the interior lot section, which is 6.11, 611, that says in 611B, 3, that the creation of any new, excuse me, it's 2. An interior lot should be used only for a single-family dwelling. So I think that is something, and the only reason I looked at that was because I was looking for the answer, or what I would say back to the woman who raised this question about interior lots, and wanted to read the whole interior lot section before I got back to her, and I noticed that and thought, I think I need to raise that and see what folks think about it, starting with, I think, the applicant's attorney.
And I was going to say, I acknowledge I received Mr. Smith's request. I am not prepared to address it tonight because I have not had the opportunity to actually look at the regulation. I know I touched on it briefly last time, and I think you raised a question. I have a couple of technical questions for Mr. Sacco that I need to address with him, and frankly, just need to take a closer look at the regulation. But I am, that is on my list of items to be prepared to discuss at next week, the next meeting.
Okay. So at this point, I can leave that there. I have provided the commission with the appropriate regulation, just so you can take a look at it without digging out your regs, and to the definitions, one being the definition for interior lot and the other definition of lot itself. So that's really all I have. We'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Questions from commission members before we open it up to the public? Fred.
I'd like a clarification of why 15,000 yards of fill are going to be brought into that property, raising it, I think, 5 or 6 feet, and also why a berm is necessary. It almost seems like you're creating an island in the neighborhood. You know, a higher elevated piece of property, a berm around it, and I'm just curious, why is that necessary?
I will defer the technical piece to Mr. Sacco at our next meeting, but my understanding is that the fill that's being brought in is to raise the area of the homes above the flood elevation. That's the non-technical answer, but he could, I know, and because it's come up previously, what the impact of that on the surrounding neighborhood is. We don't think there will be, but the short answer is to elevate the, excuse me, would be to elevate the location of the homes.
Okay.
Other questions from commission members before we open up? Marcy?
Hi, in relation to the fee lot, and it's probably more geared to you, Chuck, but, you know, as far as zoning goes, is it standard practice, you know, I assume they're coming in like a PRD, where they're looking at the whole lot and trying to fit the number of lots. Are they required to go through the R3 regulations and say, this is how many lots I could get using the R3? And is that why the fee strip question is coming into play, to consider how many units are there?
The issue relates to the eligibility for the open space development consideration. In other words, normally you can subdivide your property. You can always subdivide your property. You have whatever it is, 12 acres here. You can, anyone can just subdivide your property. The general concept for an open space development is that you decrease the lot size or the area around the lots, and then you make a greater amount of open space available. So that's the theory of why you even want an open space. Why we even have this in our regulations is because there is a benefit sometimes of concentrating the development in a particular area, therefore enlarging the open space so you don't have piecemeal bits, but you have it in an area, particularly if it's contiguous to other open space. That's the general theory behind you want open space developments at all. In our regulations, we authorize a conventional subdivision, division the lots, doing it that way. We basically decrease the size of the lots, provided you can do it, or we also authorize common interest communities. I don't think they can meet a open space conventional subdivision because they don't have the frontage, I think. Is that correct? Or?
Sorry, thank you. The strip out to Arc Road is not at least 50 feet wide. It's 3 feet short. I know they've approached that property owner several times, and that property has no interest in selling any portion of their property. That's what I've been told.
But we do allow it as a common interest as another option, but it still begs the question, if this is an interior lot, another section of the regulations governing interior lots, this is what Harry raised, says you can have interior lots can only be used for a single family dwelling. So this isn't a single family development, this is a lot more. So there may be other restrictions within the regulations that would limit this development if because of this frontage issue. They can't do a subdivision, and they may not be able to do this common interest development if this other provision applies, or that's the issue that Attorney Such is going to be looking at and give us her answer to. So I don't know if that answers your question, Marcy.
Well, I mean, it does in a way, because I can think of projects that, it seems to me, if you can get the access road in and meet subdivision based on that, then you could potentially have parcels that are an interior parcel to a main street. I've seen it before. I guess the question I'm saying is, if we look at the road standards and access, does that meet, does that cut the mustard, so to speak? But I mean, I still, as far as density, would like to understand, when you take all the available land, and assuming you had access, if you were to do it based on the R3 calculations, how many houses would be, done, and are they proposing more or less than what might be all other circumstances being said, which would really come under the intent of the open space, which is, okay, we'll put the same number of houses or fewer houses on smaller area and then give that back to the open space.
Harry can go into this. My understanding is our regulations, they have a formula. So, and if you take the total acreage, you use this formula, and you come out with a number. And what Attorney Suchins has said is that they've assumed that they've only owned up above the mean high water, and using that calculation, the density, which is 12, would be permissible under that.
Yeah, that's correct. And the only thing I could add to that is I believe they've looked at tentative provisional subdivision layouts, assuming they could possibly acquire the missing 3 feet to provide a full 50-foot right-of-way for a road into the property, a public road. And I think the number of lots they figured they could possibly get was approximately the same. I can't remember the exact number, but it's in the ballpark, if not, at least 12. So there's that.
Any other questions from commission members before we open up the public?
Yeah, I have a question. I think it's probably for Mr. Sacco, but I want to say that. So he's the engineer on the project. He's the engineer on this project.
Yes, but the people in the back can't hear you. Is it on?
Yeah.
Oh.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the terminology, I think, has been used in certain, questions that have been asked as far as flooding for the neighbors, and would the, and it seems to be, I think, would he be able to give a very solid answer to, is this going to affect the neighbors around this property? Is it going to affect them in a positive way or a negative way? Is that drainage system going to work very proper? Is it, and how long, do those systems last for? Or, do they cake up and flood and then something blocks it? So basically my concern is, how is it going to affect the neighbors? Is it going to make their, property worse? Or can it make it better? So I'd like to have more of a solid answer there, instead of, so we assume it's going to be a lot better. I'd like for that to be a little bit more solid if possible.
Yep. I was actually just looking for the plan. I will absolutely have him address that again, but I think what I would direct you to, because if you wanted to go back to the video from the last meeting, he did go through that analysis with respect to particularly the stormwater and the changes to the stormwater pattern that will draw some of the water that is currently flowing to the Brightwood neighborhood toward the wetlands, and therefore minimize some of the concerns or, wet yards and situations that they've been running into, because it will redirect the water and bring it to the wetlands, which is where it wants to wind up in the first place. There is, and I believe, if you go back to the presentation, I'll make sure he has a copy with us next time. There is a plan that depicts the or the current existing conditions and where the stormwater flows, and then a post-development condition that shows that flow to the Brightwood neighborhood in particular is reduced and redirected away from them. With respect to flooding, I know he had, it was raised in the neighbor letter that was just raised, but again, at the last meeting, I direct you to his comments where, and I'll make sure again, he redirects it, but that a lot of the flooding in the area is based on the capacity of the river and the flows of the tides coming in, and water coming in, not water that's trying to exit, and the impacts there. So I will make sure, but there is no question, I think the record in his presentation really highlights the fact that this is intended to be, with respect to stormwater, definitely for the neighborhood, an improvement over existing conditions, because we'll be able to address that, and that there's no there'll be no adverse impact on the flooding, because that's something that's outside of our development site, and frankly, due to really the coastal influences rather than anything in a developed condition.
Right. No, it's just basically what this project is going to present. Is it going to be worse, or and worsen the flooding or not? And how long do those systems last for? Do they decay? Do they not decay? Does it last 5-10 years, and then they're going to start having problems, in the near future?
Right. No, those systems are certainly designed to last, my understanding is north of 40 or 50 years. You think about any kind of development, those kind of stormwater systems are really intended to be, long-term, long-lasting. I think the other, component here is that as a common interest community, there will be, common ownership funds, et cetera, to make sure that maintenance, just like you would with lawn or anything else, all of that is properly maintained. Make sure he.
Can I add one thing? This may not be relevant, but I've always heard that the real flooding in this area began when the floodgates were adjusted or removed down by Tabor, and I'm just wondering if you could tell me if that's rumor or if that's truth, and how that might impact, what's happening with, the neighborhood, because they've obviously had a lot of water issues for a long time, and it would be nice to get on the record, whether that was exacerbated by the removal of a floodgate or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. Any other questions from commission members? If not, then we'll open it up to the public. Just with the understanding we are going to continue the public hearing, by the way, so you will have an opportunity the next night. But please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and love to hear from you. Any members of the public wish to comment at this time?
Hi, it's Claudio Riccitelli, 23 Brightwood Lane. I hear that we're raising the elevation 6 feet, and I'm right in the heart of it. And the first thing that comes to mind is, no matter what you put there, everything's coming downhill to me. And we just had an elevation done where we were out of the flood zone. So what happens, and I realize that you're building these houses to get them out of the flood zone, but now that I'm out of the flood zone, am I back in the flood zone? Does anyone have an answer to that, or how that happens? Anyone? No?
Mr. Riccielli, we'll direct that to the applicant, and that's the question.
I'm looking for strictly, you guys are obviously a lot smarter than I am. I'm not sure. You're raising elevation 6 feet. I'm out of the flood zone. Am I back in it?
That's something we'll ask that's an expertise. We'll ask the applicant's engineer to address.
Okay, and well, that's good for now. Thank you.
Hi, Maria Earhart, 5 Marshall Place. I'm disappointed again this evening to hear that there's discussion regards to Brightwood. I have much respect for all of my neighbors. However, Marshall stands to be significantly impacted by this as well. The closing discussion was regarding water. And how it is exiting onto Brightwood, or existing water onto Brightwood. I think it's important to also consider that water exits onto Marshall as well, and that needs to be considered. I thought I heard that we were going to hear some discussion on buffering on Marshall, because that was also not part of the discussion at the last meeting, and I don't recall hearing that either. I just want to say that I don't think that shoehorning these 12 units in this interior lot is in the spirit of the neighborhood. Beginning with the first house on Arc and Marshall Road, all the way down on the west side of Marshall into the cul-de-sac on Marshall Place, and all the houses on Marshall Place are a total of 12 homes. So this proposal is to take 12 homes and drop it in the middle of this island that's going to be created, which is not in the spirit of the existing neighborhoods that are currently there. So, thank you very much.
Excuse me. Did you state your name for the record? I think.
Yes.
Yes, you did. I thought you did. Right.
Hi, I'm Neil Warner. I'm in 19 Brightwood Lane. I want to echo my neighbor Claudio's same sentiment about the elevated land and what it's going to do to our risk of extra flood. I can tell you, at 19 Brightwood Lane, we did have flooding years ago. We live on a split level, and water came into the house. We got a sub pump put in there since then. It's been active. It's been operating due to some heavy rains and what have you. My concern is we have two really big boulders in our backyard, and according to this proposition, they're going to put two houses, which would require massive blasting. That's 100 feet from our house and our backyard pool, which, by the way, ever since the clearing was done a couple years ago, the underground water damaged our pool since that clearing happened. We had to get a new liner. These are major concerns that we have, and I'll bring up more to the next meeting, and I want to thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Other members of the public? Yes, sir.
Giuliano Frenza, 18 Brightwood Lane. Since I've lived at 18 Brightwood Lane, after a rain, our backyards flood. That water sits for 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. One of my wife's cousins asked us, "Don't you sit on this deck in the backyard at night? It's nice and cool." I said, "No, you can't sit in this backyard. You get eaten alive." So, yes, they're across the street from me, but we have water problems on our side also. The water does not drain. So are we going to bring more water to our neighborhood again? Where's this water going to go? We hear about a plan with a berm, with a pitch, to pitch this water away from us, but I would like to see this done professionally and given to us to say, this berm has been proven and it should work, or it will work, for this type of development. Like the building department said, are you going to put a shovel full of dirt, that's a berm, or are we going to put 3 feet, 4 feet swale of dirt and compacted material that's not going to allow water to penetrate through, and then we have this river running down the hill. So that's my concern, and I would like somebody to please give us an answer to these questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chris Ackerley, 10 Buckley Road. To answer the question of the gentleman in the black shirt, why raise the lot and create a berm? To prevent the coastal flooding that has happened on their property. The last Zoom meeting that we had, there was photos that were submitted that were showing the intersection of Buckley and Arc with the hydrant that was flooded. Guess who took the picture? Guess who couldn't get out of the road? Guess whose other 12 new neighbors won't be able to get out of the road? When, I don't know if that was a 100-year storm, that was from one of the recent hurricanes. So, in conjunction with the high tide and the hurricane that came through, that's what happens to the roadway there. And, it's blocking off Marshall Place too, because folks aren't getting out on Tabor and they're not certainly coming down Arc. So now what are the new neighbors on Buckley going to do? They're not leaving their houses either. So that's why they're creating a berm and raising the property. As far as the stormwater runoff that comes down Buckley Road, I got 3 photos I can show you folks from last week from the heavy rain that we got on June 14th. Guess what? Water rolls downhill like a lot of other things, and it comes down Buckley Road. And I got the 3 photos to show it in front of my house, the 10 Buckley, just washing down all dirt from the property up the street from me. Despite how the project developer has taken care of his property in Main Street, we all know who we're talking about, he's never dropped a nickel to take care of Buckley Road, which he has owned. My father-in-law has built a house at number 12 Buckley in 1965 and has maintained the road himself, and now has turned it over to me because he's gotten older in age. So I've spent the money to keep the roadway passable because the town does not maintain it because it's a private road. So the developer hasn't dropped any dimes as far as fixing the road, let alone cutting any trees that have fallen down the road that have blocked the road and taken down the utilities from storms in the past. And also, in closing, I and myself, Mike Gargamelli, in the tan shirt, stand the most to lose, as we'll both be losing property to the roadway in front of my house and on the side of his house as it passes between our two properties.
Thank you. Other members of the public wish to comment?
Hello, Mike Gargamelli. My family of four lives, I have to read this because I can't remember everything, lives on 30 Brightwood Lane. For the record, all of us are very much opposed to this entire absurd plan. As Chris said, our home borders both the cul-de-sac and Buckley Road. Therefore, we are in the crosshairs of everything that is bad and wrong about this proposal. Over the years, we have spent a lot of time, money, and worry attempting to protect our home from the ever-present risk of storm-related water, which we've heard a lot about this evening. That is born from the flooding that we experienced as a result of Hurricane Sandy. The flooding was followed by an extended period of lost electrical power and restoration and weeks of reconstruction. It was horrible. I was writing this and reading this, those same emotions came back in the same way they do when I lay awake worrying about future flooding. However, now, those worries about the next storm are compounded by the potential impact of this proposal and a two-way road being placed oddly close to our home, so close that it will generate noise and light into our living area and violate the peace and quiet that we currently enjoy. If you take an objective look at this project, and that's what I've been trying to do for the past week or so since we had a loss in our family and I've been able to concentrate on it, there's a significant list of negatives, and I'd like to just name a few. The property is either in, and we've heard this already, or borders a FEMA flood zone. It is a high risk to inevitable future seawater levels produced by climate increase. The surrounding area already floods regularly, as my neighbors have noted. The area in Buckley Road in particular is prone to power and internet outages that often last far longer than they do in other parts of the town. It is likely a danger to wetlands and the environment. It would generate noise and light pollution onto existing residents. As I mentioned, it will lower surrounding property values and disrupt our long-established, safe and cohesive community. I think we need to ask, are there any positive impacts or enough to come close to overcome all of these things that I've mentioned? Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Other members of the public wish to comment?
I wasn't going to speak. Can everybody hear me with the mask? Okay. I'm just this Delta variant. I'm doing this for my family. I wasn't going to speak because I've spoken a lot. You know, I've devoted a lot of my time along with many of my neighbors to this. It's been.
Excuse me, just can you identify yourself?
Sorry, I thought I was very famous at this point. Louisa DeLand, 26 Brightwood Lane. Barbara and I and the rest, this has been like a second job for us. We've started a website. I've worked with many people in the land trust. I've talked to people, local businesses. I've actually been looking for one person who would see a positive in this project. I only see one, but I think that it's marked that man is not here tonight. Like, in all fairness, this is a wonderful community in the heart of our town. Before I moved here, I was born here. Before I moved to the Tabor area, I didn't know that these cozy, sweet spaces existed. And I fell in love with it. And it was very hard for us, but my husband and I bought our first home there. And every time I look around or talk to my neighbors or, go walk, it's been a complete, sanctuary during COVID, during hard times, What do we get right out of that? We get hit with this. And to be honest, I loved that you asked, how is this going to affect the neighbors? How do we feel? Thank you for that. People are coming out on a stormy night in the middle of, there's a bloody pandemic still rearing its ugly little Delta head. We really care. And to be honest, I come from a family of developers. My father is a well-respected architect in the area. And I respect Vinny Sr. I don't understand why he's going this route because honestly, on a technical level, it doesn't make any sense. He'd make more money right now doing one massive house there, which in all fairness, we'd probably be all right with. But at this point, he could be open to the opportunity of us coming together and buying that land and giving it back to the land trust. He'd probably make the same amount of money on that. To be honest, with the type of stuff you have to do with DEEP and figuring this out, this is gonna go on for months. And that's expensive. And I know they have the money and they have big pockets and we've got 3 builders here and I respected this group before I've seen the way that this has been handled. But when I hear that an elderly man who I really care about has been maintaining that road and has now passed it on to someone else because this has never been cared for, the other points I want to just briefly touch on are, it will affect it adversely because I've had architects, I've had engineers look at these plans. The first thing they said is that island, as it was stated, is going to be on a marsh. Back there, I don't care what you say. If you go there now, sure, it's the summer. It's probably pretty moist right now, but you try and go there in November, December, or February, it is a marsh back there. You're not walking on anything stable. So you're putting an island on top of that marsh. Now, the system that we looked at with that engineering, maybe it's going to be okay for 20, 30 years, but we have climate control issues happening that nobody's looking at right now. I mean, our president is trying to, but it's another thing. Without the type of maintenance that you need on a system like that, we 100% will have water coming in. I do believe that in the research I've done, it's been exacerbated by the closing of those gates. I do think that that needs like some town analysis, but with the climate issues, it's happening more and it's only going to continue to. That's why we're all here. When you mentioned, Amy, about our lawns getting wet, that's not our issue. Our neighbors have done, we've had floods and FEMA issues that we've tried to reclaim, and people have also had a very hard time getting their money recouped by FEMA with these things. It's a real issue for the town of Branford and for the whole shoreline community. Frankly, there are tidal laws. This is a science, it's environmental law, and there are tidal laws that very clearly state about mean areas. So I'm sure you'll spend the time working with somebody or getting some clerks to look into that information because I care about this land. I care more about my community. I think you've got a legal battle ahead of you, and I'm glad that everybody here cares about as much about Branford as we do, because honestly, it doesn't make any damn sense, to be honest. I'm sorry, I'm impassionate. This is ridiculous.
Thank you. Other members of the public wish to comment?
Tim Connell. I live at 16 Woodside, which is on the main road going into Brightwood. My backyard floods because Brightwood was built up to put a berm in to keep the water off of their property. So now you're going to go over and build another berm on the backside of Brightwood. So now the water's going to go down a hill back into my backyard again, which we've tried to solve this problem by putting a curtain drain in. It's a pain. I mean, my next door neighbor, when we get 2 inches of rain, has a foot of water for a month in his backyard. I don't see this working out for anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public wish to comment?
Hi, my name is Micah Knotts. I don't live in the neighborhood. I'm actually all across town over in Stonewall Lane, off of Damascus. But I can tell you that I've heard a lot tonight about open access, public interest, and I don't have water in my backyard. But what I do have is 2 beautiful dogs who go through those trails with me up at Ecology and down below every morning. This is where you will find me. You will see my Facebook page. You will see the natural habitat that is back there, the beauty that is there, the sense of serenity that comes along with this open space that exists right now in our town. We're one of very few towns that has the preservation of these types of wetlands. we are envied. People see my photos all over the world and want to know, where do you live? And I say, in a small little town in Branford, Connecticut. And they're like, that's crazy. But what's even more crazy is that we want to disrupt this area and put in 12 homes in a very small area that is definitely going to have an effect on our natural habitat. So today, I'm here to support all of you, but I'm really here to support the ones who don't have a voice, that are running through those woods, that are flying and nesting in that area, that brings such joy to the residents who come through Tabor. They just did all of this work over at Ecology. I don't know if any one of you have ever walked the new trail up to Chet's Pond right now, or have ever gone to the top of Ecology and realized there's all trails that run through the back, the same area that we're talking about developing. That beauty, that natural sense of serenity, and that treasure that we have in Branford is at risk for a few more homes that really necessarily I don't think we need. And that's just my input as a non-resident to the area, because it just means that much to me as a resident of Branford, somebody who takes very much great pride in what we have to offer here, our open wetlands, our space, our supply pond, our parks. It is something that is very unique to Branford, and I would really hate to see that we start to veer away from and give up these lands that really should be protected. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Barbara Lucas Riccitelli. I live at 23 Brightwood Lane. Thank you to the commission, and so happy we're at a live meeting. This is terrific to have the energy in the room. Luis and I have been working together with the neighbors so that we can try to give them information. Hopefully, I don't know if it's making it easier for everyone or not here, but it's a really big project. It's very important to us that everybody's aware of what's going on in our own backyard. For Claudio and I, it's literally in our backyard. We're gonna look out our kitchen window and look at the back of 3 houses if this goes through. Right now we have these beautiful, majestic, mature trees. I know it's on someone else's land, but it's been like that since 1972 when his parents built the house. So we've put a lot of effort into it, and I'm really proud of my neighbors who came out tonight to at least share a few comments. I'm super disappointed in the applicant tonight because we got everybody here. I thought we were going to have more information. Just having Amy Sushins, the attorney here, and kind of deferring a lot of really important answers. I'm the person that sent the email about the interior lot question. And yeah, maybe it just boils down to this is an interior lot that is supposed to have a single family home. And that's a legal question, not an engineering question. And so Ms. Sushin said she was gonna refer to Mr. Seiko, the engineer. I don't understand why it's more complex than that when it's just a regulatory matter. And so we're really keen. We're going to stay on it and keep providing information, looking at the information, asking questions. I don't see I see passion against the development. And I think that Luis and I are very respectful of our neighbors and open to people's opinions. We're not enforcing our opinion, but I manage a little Facebook group called the Indian Neck Neighborhood. And I just put up a poll the other day and asked the question like, okay, the hearing's going to be live. Are you for this project? Do you think it's good for the neighborhood? Are you against it or not sure? Not a huge response, but I got 24 people against it. 2 said not sure, they'd like more information, and 0 in favor. And I don't see any passion from the applicant. Like, this is, okay, it's a 12-home community. Here it's going to be marketed under this name. We don't have that. There's going to be association to manage all our conflicts with floodwater in the future, but there's no structure to the association. We don't know how that will happen or how conflict resolution might happen with the future as to be named association. We just get the feeling that the developer is going to come in, build up this island, plop these 12 houses here, say the drainage is good, and then it's sold, it's gone, he's out of it. So we know how he benefits. I know how Mrs. Hines benefits because she's willing to let her house be demolished to have a new house. I don't really know what that arrangement is, but we're not willing to have we love our homes and we want to keep this neighborhood as good as it already is. We never asked the town for anything extra. We like it the way it is. So that's just my comments for this evening, and I appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public that wish to comment? Yes, sir.
I'm Adrian Fuentes. I'm here to support our friend Isa. Pretty much, I moved here from North Carolina, from New Jersey, and I like how friendly everyone here is. And after hearing everyone's story, it's a little sad that everyone's going through such hardships in these times, and pretty much the owner really doesn't care, just more money. I just want to say, my comment may not matter, but I just want to say it's a little sad, and let's go Branford. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public that wish to comment? Yes, sir.
Dennis Flanagan, 14 Brightwood Lane, RTM, also representing the area that's in question here today. When this project initially started some time back, fortunately the developer, we were concerned about the traffic flow, the potential of traffic coming down Brightwood Lane. Fortunately, to our knowledge, that's not part of the equation. But when we started listening to this project, our first concern was the cul-de-sac, the emergency access through the cul-de-sac. Brightwood Lane, for many people who don't realize what kind of a street it is, it's a friendly neighborhood with a nice cul-de-sac, and the only traffic that comes down there basically is the residents who live there. So one of my questions is the fact is this a prerequisite to the approval of this for the applicant? Does he need to come down Brightwood Lane through that cul-de-sac for the emergency access? Is that a requirement that is required from the planning and zoning? The other thing is, we're talking about the 12 houses, and if I'm looking at it correctly, the houses are going to be at a higher elevation to all the homes that are on the right side of Brightwood Lane. If I'm looking at it correctly, they'll be up higher, and their backyards will be down here. So obviously a water concern is a big question, and a concern for the people who live on Brightwood Lane. The other concern that I have tonight, it seems like there's, we're waiting for answers for the DEP, and a lot of unquestionable answers that, we're going to be continuing with the next public hearing. Is the water level, is the tide this right? I mean, the people in Brightwood Lane in the area need to have these answers, because this basically is going to affect our homes, our value of our homes, and for anybody who lives in the neighborhood, about the potential of the flooding we've had over the number of years. Somebody brought up about the dikes being pulled out down on the river. I don't know why that ever happened, but believe me, as the gentleman talked about Woodside Drive a couple of years back, that water just poured down through Woodside to the back of our homes on Brightwood Lane. And my last concern is, I know the applicant has hired this attorney to represent him. It'd be nice if the applicant would come here and maybe kind of give us a little insight of what he would like to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public that wish to comment?
Hey, I'm Chris Jensen. I'm at 23 Marshall Road. I just want to thank all you guys for your opportunity to come out here and listen to us talk about this. And I also want to talk to the attorney. Is your client willing to entertain some other ideas besides building 12 homes? I know one house was on the table. I think a vineyard, was that the original plan? land?
You can direct your,
Yeah.
I'm not going to.
Right.
I would like this to get back to the builder and then have her bring back the questions for the next meeting would be ideal.
Absolutely, and you can certainly feel free to talk to Ms. Suchins off the record as well.
Okay, that'd be great. And then the third and final one, perhaps maybe the town purchasing the land for open space, because I know that's been talked about as well. I think if we can all come up with an idea where it would benefit everybody, that would be the best way to go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Other members of the public wish to comment? Okay, hearing none. Questions from commission members? Any follow-up from commission members or staff? Okay, we are going to continue this matter as a public hearing. It's going to be continued to our July 15th meeting. Does the applicant, do you have any further responses this time, Attorney Suchins?
No, I just wanted to note for the record, I had emailed Terry, but said I would state it on the record. We do need to give you an extension of time to get to the July 15th meeting. So I'm stating that on the record, that we do consent to that. I will just note that my clients were in fact on the last two meetings because we were just addressing, frankly, the mean high water tonight. That was why I'm the only one in attendance, because it was just intended to raise that issue to the commission, and we're working on the rest of the substance that was underway. So it was not intended to be, as I said, everybody else has been on the prior calls, and I do expect that the goal, once we are able to follow up with Mr. Kozak and finish a number of the other questions, certainly, I think I had said earlier, we're working on the screening for Marshall. That was one of the things that was requested at the last meeting that Mr. Sacco's working on. I will reiterate to him that he probably needs to run through some of the highlights of the presentation about the stormwater and the flows and what our position is with respect to the reliability of the systems that we're proposing. I don't think that this is something that's new or untested. And then I think with respect to just one other thing. Oh, just the other comment about some of the flooding, I'll make sure that Mr. Sacco is able to address that question as well, because I know it's come up tonight and was noted in the letter.
Thank you, Ms. Suchins. Just a question about procedure. I know this application was filed before the governor's executive order expired. Do you think we get the extra 90 days? Because I know you've granted the extension, but I'm just thinking in...
I know we can get to the July 15th meeting, and I'm sort of evaluating that. I know that there have been... I've not had the opportunity to look through all of the details on the legislation that went into effect as of today with respect to timeframes and, frankly, opportunities for meeting styles that none of us have had. So it's something I'm looking at, because I know without your, you don't meet in August.
We don't meet in August, right.
So I'm looking at the timing and the effects of what statutory extensions we have available, as well as whether there's any opportunity for the governor's executive order to still apply. I think based on if we are looking strictly at the what I'll call the 35-65 or 65-35-65, our 65-day extension runs out, I think, very late in August. So the question about the applicability of the executive order and that extension is something that I'm looking at.
Sure. I mean, my impression was that because this was filed it was sort of automatic. You get the 90 days, you don't even have to say you're exercising it when I just read it. And since you filed it while it was in effect, that we got it. But I don't know. I haven't looked closely at it, but okay, I just threw that out.
Certainly looking at it, especially because of changes that went into effect today.
Good.
Yes, suggested that we, in our email. Right.
Great, excellent. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Suchins.
Great, thank you.
Actually,
one question. Do you know what your next meeting is going to be? Because we know it's going to be July 15th, but are we going to be back in person?
Yes.
Or are we virtual?
I think we're back in person for July. I think the tentative conclusion was that July was going to be both in person, and then we're going to
evaluate.
Evaluate.
Exactly the same thing. Just,
yes.
I realized we didn't technically announce, as we're required to for the continuation, where we would be. So I just want to confirm that for everybody.
Absolutely. The continuation is going to be July 15th, right here at this location at our regular time, which is 7 p.m.
Okay. Thank you. We'll see you then.
One thing, Harry, I am, one of the questions raised was communicating directly with the DEP, and I think it's okay for you to communicate directly with Mr. Kozak, but I think you can, in your inquiry, ask for comments from the attorney from the Attorney General's office as well, if they have an opinion on the issue of at least on the title question. I mean, it can cover both the resource question, but also the title question if they have an opinion. Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So read the ownership.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay, so this hearing is continued to our July 15th meeting. Thank you very much. So we'll take a, we'll take a 5-minute break right now, if that's okay.
Turn the heat up.
Good evening. We're going to call this meeting back to order. Where's
Massimo?
Massimo? Maybe we'll wait a second for Massimo to get back here. Right. So what we'll do, the next public hearing is, so the applicant can get ready, if the applicants are here for this one, is Andrew Renone, KIOP Branford LLC, Kimco Realty owner, at 1025, 1091 Main Street, special exception, minor modification, upgrade security lighting. Okay, and before you begin, we'll just wait for Massimo. Did you see him out there?
I didn't see him.
Okay.
Did you go look for him?
Yeah. Good.
First Bank of America, West Main Street.
What's that?
That's the Red Sox.
I saw it today. Yeah,
All right.
I saw that.
Red Sox won 15 to 1.
I can't believe they're willing to beat that pitching staff. I just can't believe it. Starting pitching staff. But it was a ball game today.
Yeah, that's
He's ever seen 15 runs.
Control that, doesn't call it foul.
But they can hit us. They can really hit. They're playing smart.
they did that.
The starting pitching's not gonna, second time around the league. Perez,
For all the games.
No kidding.
Pavetta, doesn't look.
Well, you get into the basket, so so important, I should consider. For the kids in the city, you probably a big kid, take all the doctor. There was Charlie Day, first half, free throws overhead, 3-pointers overhead, so it's kind of fitted to keep the free throws to win
Okay, you may proceed, sir.
Hi, okay. My name is Miles Oros, representing Horton Group in place of Andrew. Basically, very quickly, the request is for permission to upgrade the current lighting around the drive-up ATM at the Bank of America. Despite the town's ordinance, the reason being to meet bank standards for customer safety and security. Basically, the short version of it is there's 2 existing light poles that currently have 1 fixture on each of them, and the plan is to upgrade them to have 2 fixtures on each pole, and add 1 new light fixture to the building itself behind the ATM drive-up lane. And it was worth noting that the current LED upgrade that was done 3 years ago was approved by this committee, and currently in New York, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, they have standards similar to the Bank of America's standards that are law in those states. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Harry, do you want to review your staff report?
Sure. This was submitted originally as a minor site plan amendment or a special exception amendment. And I looked at it and I looked at the requirements and regulations, as was just mentioned. What's proposed in terms of the amount of light on the ground will go way over the maximum limitation, the maximum foot candle reading that you can have, which is 8-foot candles in this zone. That's the most permissive you can have, basically. Outside of anywhere, unless you're under a gas station canopy, it goes up higher. So it's basically, that's the bottom line, just doesn't meet the regulations. So I couldn't approve it as a minor, so I asked the applicant and said, look, here's the section of the regulations, here's the requirement, you don't meet it. Do you want to withdraw your application? There's already light level on the ground that frankly exceeds the 8.0 foot candle limit because there was prior staff here did not catch that. So I understand there may be standards of the banks. This requirements that we have are not atypical for communities I've worked in a 35-year career. So I don't think our requirements are really out of whack necessarily. Many functions and corporations have standards and desires to have more light than allowed under the regulations. So that's sort of where it stands. It's nothing I could approve, and I don't think it's anything the commission can approve because it just exceeds what's allowed in the regulations.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Harry. Questions from commission members?
Harry, how far over are we talking? What's the difference?
8, I think they're proposing at some point as many as 20-foot candles in some spots under.
I think so.
Yeah, so it's at least double.
Correct.
Is there any?
That's a pretty, go ahead, no.
Is there any photometrics to show if it's leaving the property in terms of the light levels?
I didn't even bother looking at that. I think where they're proposing lights is actually underneath the drive through the ATM, so I think the brighter areas, it's certainly not going to be that bright at the perimeter, but there's a lot of light spill already around there anyway, so you're right at that corner of Short Beach and West Main Street.
Yeah. The situation, at least in this particular bank, is a corner.
Yeah.
And it's really not affecting anybody that I could visualize because it's a corner and it's all facing Route 1 or Short Beach Road.
Yep.
There's not a homeowner or a business that I think
No,
I don't know.
Not along the property edge, no.
Yeah.
So it's just a question of the regulation and the amount of light.
Yeah, but how bright is bright? I mean, I can't visualize how bright.
20-foot candles is, if you wanted a really bright gas station canopy, that's what you're talking about?
This is under
the canopy for the drive-through, right. And I can make them a couple of spots around the building as well.
Is that where the ATM machines are and what are the, is this?
No, they're putting an ATM drive-through ATM, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, through the existing drive-through?
Yes, correct.
On the portion of the building facing Route 1. So the ATMs you walk up to are on the other side of the parking lot side.
Is this light for the ATMs or is this light
No,
just
the drive up.
lighting?
It's for the drive up.
It's for the drive up ATM. It goes along the drive up lane.
Yeah.
So there are actually two light poles that go along there. I don't know if, I think you guys have the drawings. It's on page 6. It shows underneath, if you're looking at the page underneath the ATM, the ones labeled UGX1. I think if you have they're colorized, they're green. So currently they're on light poles. There's one fixture on.
Yeah, that was attached to the staff report that went out, I think, for the last meeting, so.
I guess my question revolves around, have there been incidents of theft and, with additional light? Is it being proposed to, create a safer environment against theft because we're dealing with money and,
Yeah, so that's the purpose, to meet the bank's security standards. Specifically at this location, I couldn't answer that.
So I have a question also.
Sure.
Is this regulation adjusted for gas stations only?
That is one, I think that's the only exception to the 8.0 foot candle limit. Because just recognize you're getting up, you're moving things around, you're doing, putting things in the gas thing in your car and everything else. So it's just the standard that was adopted is higher than the 8-foot candles for gas station candles.
So my question, again, another question, I guess, is this would create a safer environment in banks. I mean, is there an adjustment or a consideration, I think? Because I like the theory of it being brighter around banks where people, there's been so much increase in crime of late. Mm-hmm. And if this is not going to affect neighbors or driving,
right?
Can there be any? I mean, I like.
Well, you'd have to change the regulations, so that's what you'd have to do. In this particular spot, I mean, it's a really visible location. So I know there may be a general criteria, but for the the organization for the bank, but I mean, this is, you got a lot of light up there already. You already got more than 8 on the ground. You probably got, I think it's about 10 or 15 already on there from the existing lights were approved a couple of years ago. So it's probably brighter than a lot of bank drive-throughs in town already. And there's several of them. And, you know, I believe they all meet the requirements because, as far as I know anyway. But
So certain banks have different regulations.
Right.
And then they won't be able to do this because the security won't be high enough. There has to be some.
I don't know how they would do it, whether they would not do this or whether they would just say, okay, the town won't allow us to do it, so we'll have to use the lights we've got. I mean, I really don't know. I don't know if you know.
If they would do what?
If the lighting level you're proposing isn't approved, would you not put the ATM in corporately?
Oh, I couldn't answer that either. I'm not sure.
You don't know. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, are they doing it for a safety reason?
It is for a safety reason, to meet the bank's specific security standards.
Are you aware of any particular theft or incidents in this location?
I'm not.
I, for one, would be curious to know what, in fact, is the bank's lumen level requirement for security. And do we have catalog cuts on the light? Because I'd be concerned about spillage from a high fixture onto Route 1 being just a bother driving up Route 1.
Yeah.
To catch highlights in your eyes. And has anything else been explored to provide equivalent suitable illumination as opposed to swapping out heads on a pole?
No, for these plans, no.
What Joe just said brings me to mind about the way these lights are going to be installed. Because if you're coming under the bridge, this bank is up high, and you're going to be below. Coming under the bridge, if you're going southbound, I guess, on Route 1, going under the bridge towards the bank. I'm not sure. I don't know. I really don't know where these lights are. But are you going to be
how high they
right under? Even though they're facing down, you're still going to be might be in your approach might be a glare. I don't know.
How high are they going to be mounted? I can't remember.
So it's
15, 20 feet?
I think so, yeah. They're to match what's currently existing. So the height isn't changing. Right. Basically, they're just adding lights to the same pole.
Yeah, okay.
Is that fixture spread out or is it sort of canopied?
So they are downward facing lights.
Yeah, so it don't spread to the sides.
Facing outward, I don't know how to answer that. Technically, I would say a little bit, yeah, but they don't face outward. They are downward facing lights.
I mean, sort of the nature of the light. I mean, with an LED, you're going to see it as more of a point light than a spread out kind of, so it sort of hits your eye a little differently than the old lights that would do.
I'm not, I don't mind bending the regulation necessarily to get more light in an area for theft, but I do agree with Joe that, have all ways been considered to achieve the right amount of light in a way that isn't going to have any off-site impact or could potentially be more consolidated to the more risk location. And, so I don't feel like I have a good understanding. I'm kind of floundering either way because I appreciate, we have a regulation to provide a baseline. And, when you look at okay, well, a gas station is different, so it could have more. Well, people are still fumbling with money like they would at a gas station with credit cards to put things in and out of their wallets. And I think that's a, a legitimate concern that you would want to feel safe and have lighting there. Whether that lighting can be provided in a more pointed way, I don't feel like I have enough information to say that, that you've examined every way to do this to meet your standard.
Yeah, there really is, in the lighting, unlike the landscaping regulations, there's no waiver provision, so they'd have to get a variance, demonstrate some kind of hardship to the ZBA. I think it's the only way around the regulation.
Or change the regulation.
Well, that's the other option, but, that's a process for them. I don't know what the time frame is to.
It's hard to approve something, you really don't know what you're approving until it's actually installed and then see what happens. Is there some flexibility that we can sort of put it up and then kind of adjust it? I mean, I don't know how we do that.
Right, guys, it doesn't meet the regulations. We can't give these, we have no authority to approve this application. If we approve this, then someone else can come in and say, I don't have to obey this regulation, you let this guy do it. Forget it. They either get a variance or they amend the regulation to come in and say, we think, make the case and we amend the regulations. So to me, it's very.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's open and shut.
But let's open up the public. Any member of the public wish to comment?
Harry Branford, Economic Chairman, Branford Economic Development. Putting that hat on, I would say I don't like to hinder businesses, and I would like to, see whatever could happen. However, I am very involved in lighting regulations, and we enjoy a patent on light pollution and so on and so forth on something that we developed. And I just, I think that there's probably better options than just throwing another head on there. 2011 photos show that there were the shoebox with the light spreading in all directions. And sometime prior to 2019, they were changed throughout the whole parking area and around the bank. So I would think that if you wanted to just add another head, you're going to get a lot of light, but it's not the best design for lighting. My suggestion to the commission is maybe as if you were coming with a whole new project, a new building, and they would have to do a lighting plot throughout. Let them come forward with something like that, and they might have to change poles, they might have to do something different, they might have to put lights on the building, but something different from then just throwing up another light that will be to the point of coming up from underneath the underpass. That's going to hit you right in the face. So I would say try to see what they can come up with that would be better. There's options that you can put on the building. You have a canopy coming over that you could put different types of recess that would shine out a little bit more, but there's a lot of better alternatives than I think just throwing up that, because that will be bothersome to the intersection and into traffic, even though it's not a residential area. So I apologize on the business end, but I just think there's better possibilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public wish to comment? Applicant have any further comments?
No. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Any further comments from commissioners? Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Probably something we can take up in a little bit.
Yeah.
That concludes our public hearings. So we have our minutes from our June 17th meeting that I believe were mailed to us. We've had a chance to review those. Does someone want to make an appropriate motion?
Move to approve the minutes, 6/17.
Motion made by Joe to approve the June 17th minutes. Is there a second? Second by John. For discussion, all in favor? I guess it's the 5 regular. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. So you
We don't have to go around.
I know. Yikes. Okay.
Chuck, for the record, I will be abstaining because I have not completely viewed the tape from the previous meeting.
Okay. Abstaining from approval. Okay.
Yeah.
You abstain. Okay. The correspondence. Any correspondence?
There's no correspondence.
Okay. Let's take.
I had to recuse myself on item 4.
Oh, okay. For item number 4 of the minutes, let's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Can we add that?
Yes.
Set by consent, everyone on item number 4, indicating that Marcy did recuse herself.
Okay.
On item number 4. Yeah. Just
Okay.
add to the minutes. It's okay. Okay. Great. Thanks. Let's take up item number 2. This is the lighting, modification of exterior lighting. Again, I think that we don't have a choice. It doesn't comply with the regulations. I think there may be, Mr. Moretti suggested there may be alternatives within our regulations to provide additional lighting that maybe the applicant can explore, but I think right now we can't approve this. They could request a text amendment, they could apply for variance, but right now I don't think we have authority to approve it. I don't know what others think. If someone wants to make a motion to deny the application for the failure to adhere to the maximum lighting levels established by section 6.7.3C of the zoning regulations.
So moved.
Motion made by Joe. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, looks like 5. That brings us into old business. Item number 1, it looks like we have, that's the Leeds Island Road special reception. We have a public hearing scheduled for the 15th. Is that right, Mary?
Yes.
Yes.
So in item number 2, also, we have a public hearing scheduled for the 15th, special reception for Brady. So it'll be maybe a late night on the 15th, guys.
Might be a special meeting.
Luckily, it's going to be the name. Item number 3, this is 365 site plan for restaurant. I understand we're in a holding pattern for this one as well. Harry, is that correct?
I'm going to defer to Evan. He's been doing this. And
Evan, what's going on with this?
Yes, we're waiting on a few more pieces of information from the applicant and a few other pieces of the submission as well.
So we'll table item number 3 because there's waiting for information on that one. Item number 4 is a 2 3rd Avenue site plan, coastal site plan, Charles Potter and Laura Harris owners for 2 3rd Avenue. Is the applicant ready to proceed with that?
Yes, we are.
Good evening. My name is John Schmitz. I'm a civil engineer, senior engineer with BL Companies, 355 Research Parkway, Meriden, Connecticut, representing the applicant who's here with me this evening. The application involves an existing 2-family home located in Hotchkiss Grove Beach Coast Association on 3rd Avenue. As you can see by the site plan, it's an oddly shaped, pie-shaped lot. It's approximately 7,700 square feet. And I'll just point out, 3rd Avenue runs along the right side, 4th Avenue here. The home today, again, 2-family home, has driveways on both roads. The proposal is to demolish the existing structure, build a new home about a foot higher, so we're above the FEMA floodplain, but stay within the existing footprint of the existing house today. So the new home will basically just be a newer home, slightly higher. Driveways, again, same thing, driveways on both sides. It'll still be a 2-family home. Driveway off of 3rd Avenue today goes down into a basement. The basement will be eliminated. The new building will be on a slab. So a new driveway will be constructed for new driveway off of 3rd Avenue. For the most part, that's about it. Fairly simple. We submitted a site plan application as well as CAM. We are in the CAM zone. We are not direct waterfront. We're several hundred feet inland off of the beach. But be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Evan, I think you did the staff report for this one.
I did, like Mr. Schmitz stated, this application is to demolish and reconstruct a 2-family dwelling to be FEMA compliant. No change or expansion of the current use. The proposed project will not impact the bulk requirements as the current conditions are allowed to continue as a non-conformity. Or as a non-conforming structure. The proposal does not include any activity within 25 feet of an identified critical coastal resource. While the commission may wish to consider integrating a vegetated buffer, staff would know that the proposed construction is a few hundred feet from the mean high water mark and the benefits would be minimal. They satisfy the parking requirements. The proposed structure would largely remain in the same footprint as the existing structure. Therefore, no significant change to stormwater runoff or drainage issues would be created. Concerning soil erosion and sediment control, the commission would need to find that the measures proposed, to the extent that they are alternatives from those in the Connecticut DEP 2002 guidelines for soil erosion and sediment control, are acceptable. The applicant generally satisfies the coastal site plan criteria. Staff recommends one finding: the coastal site plan is consistent with the goals and policies of the Coastal Area Management Act. And one condition: prior to the start of construction, erosion control measures shall be installed to the satisfaction of the zoning enforcement officer.
Thank you, Evan. Questions from commission members?
Is there any filling of the property proposed?
The only filling would be in regards to raising the footprint, raising the house 1 foot.
So you'll be raising the ground elevation 1 foot?
Around the foundation, correct. The rest of this section, southerly portion, will remain the same as it is today. So that's correct. We'll just be raising the footprint a foot to get above, to have 1 foot above the base flood elevation. Correct.
Okay.
John, any other questions from commission members? Okay, then I think we can close this matter. Seems fairly straightforward. Someone want to make a motion to approve the application with the findings regarding the city with the Coastal Area Management Act and the condition prior to construction, the erosion control measures installed to the satisfaction of the zoning enforcement officer maintaining the project. Again, the finding of the conditions in the staff report produced by Evan. Someone want to make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
Motion to approve with that finding condition from John. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So I vote.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so then that brings us then to item number 3, which is special exception for grading. That is the 173 Hotchkiss Grove Road. I believe that's scheduled for a public hearing on July 15th. Is that correct, Gary?
Yes.
Okay. Brings into new business. We have item number 1 is the Buckley Road. That's the grading, special exception for grading application that is being heard in connection with the Buckley Road application. That additional application will be combined with the continued public hearing as well on the open space residential subdivision, and that's on the 15th. In item number 2, special exception for container storage. Also, we have a public hearing for that for the 15th.
Yes.
And item number 3, site plan retail gift shop. What's going on with that? Is that something?
Change of use to a retail gift shop. It's just listed in our use table as a site plan approval required from this commission.
Okay, is that something we just came in? Do we need more time to review, or is that something we can review?
No, I think I should have time to review it, and I would suggest July 15th.
Okay, so we'll table that and consider that on July 15th. So you ready to stay late on July 15th, Jens?
It's the last one.
Right. Item number 4, special exception for indoor recreation. And that one needs a public hearing. Is that correct? What's going on with that?
Yeah, another change of use in our use table listed under special exception, indoor recreation at the 540 East Main Street commercial condo. We recently did another application there as special exception as well. Okay. But our review should be done by July 15th.
Okay, but are they waiving the public hearing? Can we get the notice in, or can we do it on the 15th?
Yeah, we can get the notice. Actually, it's already in, I believe, in the New Haven Register. I think we had to put it in.
Okay.
So that's all done.
That's right, and I see on the agenda it does say it's scheduled for the 15th, so,
yeah.
So we'll go forward on the 15th. Great. Yeah. That brings us into other business. Item number 1, time extension for filing a Mylar for Mariners Landing.
Before we get there, though, let me just mention that we did receive another application yesterday from Mr. David Datry. You may recall, this is a old multifamily building in Stony Creek behind the post office, across the street from Peter Custer, who also has a multifamily building. This is 3 Elms Road, and it came in after we had to cut off, what we were going to put on the agenda and finalize and send it off. So just by action of state law, it's received tonight because it got in before we closed the doors yesterday, basically. So you may recall that we've had a couple of different applications in this property that have been approved in the past. So we'd have to set a public hearing for that. So it does bring up a question of if I think we can still get it into the New Haven Register and possibly have it set up for a public hearing. We have to do that tomorrow, I believe, right? It'd have to be in the paper probably Saturday. But if we open the public hearing on the 15th, I think the prior applications have, I don't know if any of them have gone just one meeting. I think they've all gone beyond that. So we need a time extension to continue it to September. And I could explain that to the applicant. But jumping into another question, the plans report is, do you want to do everything on the 15th beyond David Datry application, or do you want to consider possibly having another meeting to make the 15th maybe not as long and not as extended? 6 of one, half a dozen of another right now. So I'll throw that out there just because I think it affects what we do with David Datry, and I don't know what you'd like me to offer him in terms of review time frame.
We have so much going on the 15th. What other date would you be thinking of?
I just would default to a Thursday, probably either the following Thursday or the one after that. Probably the one after that to leave enough time in case something you need more information, you need something in order to process an application that may slop over.
Okay, so we would schedule a special meeting either on July 22 or July 29th?
Yeah, I would say the 29th probably.
22 is not good for me, but 29th is good.
Okay.
And that's 2 weeks from, can people make the 29th? Okay.
Randy was on the wall already.
Yeah. Yeah, if we're gonna continue stuff, it's good to have probably.
It's just a fallback and, if we. You gotta blame someone.
Right, okay.
Okay, time and a half.
Sounds like a song. It's like a little song.
5 meetings.
Yeah, I wish. That'd be nice.
We need one more. It'll help us in the long run.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we'll count on a special meeting on July 29th.
Okay.
Okay.
Set that up.
Then maybe just schedule that for the 29th, or do you want to open it on the 15th and continue?
Well, I'll get a meeting room, so I'll make sure the room's available, or we can go at the community house. So we'll get the groundwork laid, so we can have the meeting, but we don't need to officially notify till like 48 hours ahead of time. We'll, the week before, we'll have it straightened out well in advance.
Okay, great.
By the time of the next meeting, anyway.
Okay. Right, I know.
Well, we've had a few midnight meetings.
Complimentary coffee and donuts for staying past 9:30.
I forgot to put that in the budget this year.
Yeah, I think Buckley's gonna last a while. So. Okay, so item number 1, other business, time extension for filing the Mylar.
Yeah, this is for the subdivision, if you recall, for Mariners Landing. They wanted to divide the property, so they have a distinct property for the new portion of the development as opposed to the existing anchor reef. In order to accomplish that, they need to go through a lot of legalities, negotiating out with the condo association folks. The existing developer, I think, hasn't even turned the land over to the condo association for the existing development. There's several easements that cross both properties. They're trying to nail those down before and get them on the Mylar, which is a requirement. So they're running out of time, which frankly expired yesterday, but they've submitted the request in prior to the expiration of the time. So under the regulations, they're fine. This would allow them to have an extra 90 days to file a Mylar. So if you grant the request.
Sound okay?
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay, so we'll make a motion to approve a 90-day time extension for, okay. So who's sitting for in lieu of John?
I'll make,
I think Paul's probably the next one up since you haven't been here for a while. So.
Motion to approve the 90-day time extension for filing the Mylar for the Mariners Landing project.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Marcy, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Let's roll call. Item number 2, bond release for 23 Laurel Street.
We have memos. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, you got it. I'll wind up. Go ahead.
This is a request for a bond release for the amount of $2,675 for landscaping done at 23 Laurel Street. John Ruskowski and Dylan Willett, our zoning enforcement officers, inspected the site and recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission authorize the bond to be released in its entirety.
Is there a motion to release the bond in connection with 23 Laurel Street?
So moved.
So moved by Joe.
Second.
Second by Marcy. For discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 3, bond release for 221 West Main Street.
Bond release for landscaping in the amount of $11,900 after inspection by John Ruskowski and Dylan Willett. It is recommended that the Planning and Zoning Commission authorize a partial bond release for $10,400 and hold $1,500 because it was determined that 3 islands and the associated landscaping had not yet been installed.
Questions? Is there a motion to release $10,400 of the $11,900 bond we're holding? So we're going to hold $1,500 for that a little bit.
I'm recused.
Marcy's recused, so Paul, you're in. You're up again. So, is there someone want to make that motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by, we'll give Joe Chadwick a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, that bond is released. Number 4, bond release for 80 Bradley.
Another landscaping bond request for $2,000. Inspected by the zoning enforcement officers, it's recommended that the Planning and Zoning Commission authorize the bond release in its entirety.
Is there a motion made to release the $2,000 bond for 80 Bradley Street?
So moved.
We'll give it to Marcy, give Joe the second.
It was better by phone.
Right.
That's right, you keep reaching for the button.
I kept reaching to mute myself. Somehow I was...
Okay, so there's been a motion made in a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, so that bond release. Planners report.
Planners report. We've already kind of discussed the first item, which was fallback meeting date. As I think I mentioned at the last meeting, we are proceeding ahead with starting up the process to develop an affordable housing plan. You may recall that I reported that we got a $15,000 grant from the state to facilitate this. And they were in process of hiring Glenn Shoulder of Planometrics, who was the individual consulting firm involved in the last 2 updates of the Plan of Conservation Development. I am just starting out, feeling out people to participate in a steering committee for the development of the plan. And I guess I can go ahead and announce this. Talk to Mr. Chadwick about participating as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission, also as somebody who's been involved in affordable housing and the Branford Housing Authority in the past. So I think that would be great, and thank you so much for pitching in. So I'm gonna have to round out this group. I've talked to the first selectman about picking people, and I'd like to suggest that in the interest of time, probably proceed with that, with the input from the chair. That's okay with the commission. I think, as long as you have a representative on it, I think that's hopefully going to be a good liaison in addition to staff. And we'll certainly, keep you posted. We'll have as much public input as the budget's going to allow. And we certainly would have some, working meetings with the commission anyway on it. This would all happen during the fall. We're targeting getting a plan together by probably around the holidays or shortly thereafter, because we have to have it in place by, I believe it's sometime next spring. I think it's April 2022 or June 20. I'm not sure the exact date, to tell you the truth, but somewhere in that time frame. So there also is a regional effort underway, and we're going to coordinate with that.
Yeah, and just so everyone understands, state law is requiring every town to have their own affordable housing plan. So that's what we're doing. We got to do it by next, whatever it is.
I think it's by June, yeah.
Sometime next year. So we got the consultant. Joe's volunteered to represent the commission. So the deal is Harry would, if it's okay, Harry will, recommend the rest, and he'll consult with me. So is that okay with everyone? Yeah. Okay. So, good. Great. So you're good on that.
Okay, the only other item I've got is you may have received an email from Diane McCarthy-Berkery, who is the town's sustainability manager. And this is actually a group that's, I believe, out of Columbia University that's working through Diana with the Coastal Vulnerability Working Group, which was a group that was recommended be formed as part of the Plan of Conservation Development. So they are, I believe, working on perhaps a couple other things, but at least development of some information to try to formulate a retreat strategy, which is a question of whether town's money, when and what circumstances would be used, or what we would do to look at properties that are like repetitive loss because they're so close to the water that they're sustaining damage from flood events and storms related to sea level rise and so forth. And when it's appropriate to do that. There was actually an opportunity, I think, to do that down, I believe, Johnny, your neck of the woods, the property down off Waverly Park, I think. And the question came up, what's the policy? Why are we picking that? When should we be spending money in acquiring these properties, if ever? So they're going to provide a lot of input to the, on it, hopefully, to the Coastal Vulnerability Working Group and the town in general. So I would encourage you to take the survey if you're willing to. It was the bottom line, I guess. But I just wanted to update you on what they're doing a little bit.
So that's where the survey originated?
Yep.
That's what, and that was, the survey was done by another group, I thought, right?
This survey...
The college was...
The community engagement team, I think, is conducting this survey. So I think it's the students themselves, but I'm not 100% sure of that.
Students from, do you remember? I'm trying to remember what school.
Columbia.
Thanks, Harry. Anything else?
That's all I got. Is there anything you folks have? Outside to introduce Dylan Willett formally, who's our new zoning enforcement officer, who comes to us from the town of Woodbury, and has had a variety of other experiences in life so far. So I don't know if you would take a couple of minutes to just maybe let the commission know what your background is a little and see if they have any questions for you.
Sure. My name is Dylan. I'm a veteran of the United States Navy. I'm a graduate of Southern Connecticut State University. I have a degree in geography with a focus in GIS. I was a land survey technician for Giuliano Associates for 2 years. And then from there, I became the CEO of Woodbury. And then from Woodbury, I came here. That's my professional background. Personal, I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm also a absolute die-hard Green Bay Packers fan. So I hope you all feel I hope you all feel bad for my quarterback situation here. But that's all I got.
Great. Thanks, Dylan.
Do you live in town, or are you?
I'm from West Haven.
Excellent.
What would you look like in a year?
All right.
That's right.
Take a picture now. Just take a picture.
No. We're looking for these two to stay around for a long time now. Let's not have it.
That's right.
Be all right.
It has been an active legislative session.
Yeah.
And there's stuff that we're going to be considering. The three things that come to mind for me is marijuana is now legal sometime in the next year. We're going to have to decide whether we want to prohibit it or not. The retail sale, we allow it now. But anyway, that's just something, public, I don't know what the townspeople will think of, but it's something that may be coming up. We have a medical marijuana place now. So I don't know. Do we want to allow the commercial sale, retail sale? Yeah. Yeah. So that's something.
Remember CBD shops.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so, or just treat it like any other retail, do nothing, whatever. Anyway, that issue is out there. Accessory dwelling units, there was a statute about that. that basically, my understanding is required if you have a single-family dwelling that you are allowed as a right to have, for any single-family dwelling, to have an accessory dwelling unit unless you opt out. So there's, and I think we got time to do this, but, so we may want to consider if we want to opt out of this, and it would require a vote by us and also by the RTM, I believe, to do that, and maybe a 2/3 vote.
Does it come to us before the RTM? Or
I think it starts with us and then we go to them. To say, yeah, right. Accessory dwelling. We allow accessory apartments or in certain zones. We don't allow them in R1 and R2, but we allow them in R3, 4, and 5. And we've proved quite a bit, but it's by special permit. But the statute says you have to allow them as a right, so you don't have a public hearing. And it also
in R3 through R5, not R1 and 2.
Right, yeah, we don't allow them, I don't think we are allowed in R1 or R2.
No, but I think you'd have to allow them now everywhere if you don't
we
opt
would
out.
have, that's the change. We would mandate them, allow them everywhere as a right, no public hearing. Unless we opt out, unless we opt out and the RTM agrees with it. And I think it needs a 2/3 vote.
We have too many.
We have R1 and R2. It's ridiculously small.
That's my concern.
Cottages that are cottages that are on top of each other.
Anyway,
That's just a start.
so that's, anyway, we're flagging that issue as an issue that came out of the legislature. So you got marijuana, you got accessory dwelling units, and the remote meeting possibility is out there too, and there's options where commission members, if you don't want to come to a meeting, you could participate remotely too, or something. But I don't know if we've set up the technology for it. But there's different options for hybrids and whatever. We can have hybrids, we have in-person, I don't know. So that's something we can consider, and that's law now, I think, but it's still being fleshed out.
Energy being here with everybody.
Oh, it is. It kind of is, yeah.
Get this chit chat, we get it here,
Right. Yeah, it was nice having.
For the coffee and donuts, those fast 9:30.
Yeah, I mean,
we don't get compensated, at least they can do is.
Yeah, some of the screen sharing stuff was good, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's, there's other legislative stuff, but it was more active than normal out there.
Yeah, it was very active. It was still kind of getting more information about it. There also is a state law in this, one of the pieces of legislation, there was a requirement that, or the provision that dictates what our parking would be for multifamily dwellings, which would change what we've got now, which is 1 space per studio, 1 space per 1 bedroom, and 2.5 spaces per 2 bedrooms plus. So the new state law says you can only have 1 for efficiency, 1 for a 1 bedroom, and 2 for a 2 bedroom.
And no visitor parking?
Doesn't allow visitor parking either. So there's another opt-out provision for that. So we'd have to look at that too.
Right, yeah, that's the same thing, an opt-out provision for that one. And, right, and I don't know, there may be outdoor restaurants too.
The outdoor dining's been enshrined, I think, through at least spring, I think, of next year, basically under the current arrangement, which has been what we've had the building official actually approve and look at these very kind of sketch plans for using parking spaces. We've probably seen several throughout town. The restaurants have cordoned off part of their parking area near a door or something and had an outdoor dining area set up. So that's been continued on. I believe they've made the ZEO the approving authority of that. So, but I think most of the ones we've already got are probably just going to continue what they already have, so the sketches on file. We'll have to look into whether those approvals just roll over or whether you've got to go through the whole process of writing them something again. But it's a 10-day turnaround. It's pretty quick.
Was there any consideration, I mean, we went to the outdoor dining because of COVID, but say you had a situation where they're using 5 parking spaces, was there any consideration to what that did to the parking balance per table based on the zone or the code?
Not that I recall. It was basically, the thought was the restaurants aren't getting the clientele and the traffic, so they really don't need the parking because they're not going to have people inside the restaurant. But now that you can do both, basically, I think it's another question. I think gradually, yeah. I mean, there is a...
If extra parking spaces or the parking can accommodate, then it's kind of a no-brainer, but.
Yeah, well, this is, I think, a temporary thing just to help the restaurants get back on. And then there's another provision, I think, that runs from, I think, April next year out, and I haven't got a real good grip on what that is, but it allows them again. And this provision also talks about allowing the use of public rights-of-way for outdoor dining as well.
Interesting.
So there's a provision that would require that towns allow that. For example, dedicating a couple spaces along Main Street in front of some of the restaurants is part of this, so.
So we could set up shop on Ecology Park and have outdoor dining with food trucks?
I think you gotta have a real bricks and mortar spot.
I think Pasta Cozy, that's what.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of outside dining. I think it's a nice atmosphere, but I don't like the idea of taking parking spots from our streets and public access ways. But I also think that, if this does come to light on something that's more consistent, that the parking requirements kind of be set. With that, if they're taking parking in, some type of railings where somebody drunk or a little kid doesn't run into the street.
Yeah, most of the places have got to have some kind of barrier, but there's no criteria for what that needs to consist of. Some people use jersey barriers, which would be great, or doctored it up or made it more attractive with planters and so forth. But some people are just using split rail fences and all kinds of other temporary barriers that may not really, do a
Main
lot.
Street, there's been a sort of big spillover I've noticed onto the green from some establishments, which I think kind of.
Well, that was a town
makes it
decision.
feel more lively.
No, I think that's been great to allow, use of the green informally. There's what you can't do in the green is for example, you have a restaurant, wait staff can't go across the street to the green.
So you have to take your food over and then eat it. It's cool.
What you want to avoid is outdoor dining is good on the sidewalk, but you don't want people walking on the sidewalk, have to walk in the street to avoid the tables. So you have to have enough width to have a pedestrian lane.
I think it provides for 5 foot at least, which I think is ADA, but yeah. So we're looking at all this. It's going to take a while to digest it, and we probably, frankly, given what's going on the 15th and the following, probably be taken up in September. We can really take a chance to talk about it.
We can study that in August.
Yeah, while I'm at the beach.
Okay, anything else? Someone make a motion to adjourn?
Chuck, one thing, just to let you all know, my term is up the end of October.
Oh, okay.
And you'll be renewing?
No, I'm not planning on renewing.
Okay.
All right.
How long of a run have you had?
I took over Mary Parker's place in 2001, I think February 2nd. It's been a while. I've enjoyed it, but I'm retiring from my own work too professionally, and my wife and I are going to do some traveling, so I'm just I won't be available.
That's great news. So
Plan it around every other Thursday, I guess.
So you're with us through September, correct? You're with us through September. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the end of October, through October.
Oh, through October, okay.
Through October.
Excellent.
We go with coffee donuts on.
They want the pier. How's the pier coming? Well, whatever.
I think I'm going to work like a dog and tell you
Okay. Thanks, John. Okay, that's it. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moves and answer second. Second. For discussion, all in favor? Aye.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.